Okay. What site should the EDA evaluate for workforce housing? These are some questions people want to answer.
Maybe, may I just say a few words first to do that? Just kind of, I know the workforce housing project has been something that our community, it wasn't just the EDA, but Board of Supervisors, Town Council has talked about, and has been on the EDA's plan since 2002. So this has been a long time coming. From the school side of it, I'll just step out just a little bit. I know there's been numerous times that, I've talked with the Board of Supervisors especially about why our teachers in particular don't stay. And one of the things that we've talked about is the lack of housing that they want to stay in. And so workforce housing was one of the things that we were looking at to assist in that. So that's kind of the reason that we looked at it. The EDA's had this on, like I said, since 2002. It's been in our long-term plans. We started working on this particular project, 2014, somewhere in there. And we've been working on it ever since. So there are some things in any kind of project like this, especially when you're dealing with private sellers, that there are confidential components to it. And I think that's what has caused some of the questions, which I totally get. I totally understand. But there are some confidential things that when we enter into agreements as an EDA, we need to adhere to. So we will do our best to answer these questions. There's no secret agenda here. We'd like to bring workforce housing to our locality, and this is the first step. We've been attempting to work with local, maybe not so local, private folks to be able to do this. And until this work started, there wasn't any that were interested. So the EDA saw its role as, let's get it started. Let's get it going. All along, we are working with, or trying to work with somebody to come in and take this over. I don't want to be a landlord. I can't do it. I don't have enough time. Jennifer has two other folks helping her in the office. She doesn't have time to be a landlord. But our goal is to get the project started. We want to get it going, and this was a way to do that. So I got your questions this morning and looking at them quickly. Appreciate that. You can just kind of keep going here, Jennifer.
Yeah. So the sites that we evaluated, there were several sites we evaluated. With the town zoning, there are only certain areas you can put apartments with a special use permit. Those areas were the Heptad property. The EDA was not interested in 90 acres for an apartment complex. The Royal Lane property was one that was owned commercial. Then the other commercial properties, you have small lots that we would have had to acquire a lot of parcels to create the amount of acreage that we needed for the complex. We had narrowed our selection down to 3 sites. One of those required a lot of work, bridge work to get to the property, which put that out of the running. Then we had the Royal Lane property, and then there was one other property that the property owner would not come down on the price, so it put us out of the ballpark for the price range. We did ask Jeremy Camp, and I believe it was in that packet, if there were any other sites available that we could look at, and he wrote back and said Heptad and Royal Lane were the most readily available sites, which made us move forward with the Royal Lane property. So there were other sites identified and researched, but when it came down to it, the Royal Lane property was the most readily available parcel for this project.
Were any other offers made or received for sites by me?
I guess if that question is asking, did we make an offer on any other properties?
Yeah.
So we were in the negotiating process with another property owner, but they were not willing to come down on their price.
Did y'all receive any other offers unsolicited extra?
No.
Okay.
Madam Chair, may I have the floor just for a second? The As I understand it now, the rationale for the local town county economic development authority building and management of apartment complex was an effort to decrease the relative high turnover rate among entry-level teachers and policemen and firefighters originally. And that's what we discussed, I remember, in 2000, and that was the source of it. But I think that that's something that we could all support. But my question would be, can anyone qualify to rent a workforce housing unit as long as they meet the financial qualifications? For instance, those on disability, retirees, or people working out of town. If so, was the EDA aware that they could not reserve rentals for only the county workforce specific? In other words, hey, we're doing it for one thing, but in actuality, almost anyone can rent, and so at some point, would it not be available for what this was intended for?
True.
Is that
true? That's
Yes,
accurate.
we were aware of that.
Yeah.
We can put income guidelines on the workforce housing project. So with subsidized housing, you have income guidelines where they cannot make more than a certain amount. We could also have income guidelines for workforce housing. We were well aware that anyone that fit within that category could make application for an
It's
apartment.
income-based.
Yes.
Could you also say anybody between 35 and 50,000, but then at the same time, let's say it's $1,500 a month, but you could give a $300 credit if you work for town council?
Correct. You could give like a move-in bonus type of deal for a new teacher to the area. $200 off your first month's rent. Yes, you could do that as well.
From the project or?
Off the rent.
Off the rent.
Just off the rent.
But it would not, still not be exclusively for what it was intended for.
That's true.
Okay.
So, and you did answer number 2. And the third question was why was the Campbell site selected?
I think I answered that with number 1, that it was the most readily available site.
And the fourth question, were all EDA board members aware of the relationship between Steve and Kat?
They were. I mean, back in 2014, when we initially, it's in our, even in our minutes, in 2014, that she is what, your aunt and uncle.
Okay.
Do
And
you have written, that's not in your minutes, right?
In
You
that
and I
back-
discussed the other day, you said that you checked the minutes and there was nothing in the minutes. It had discussed the workforce housing,
No,
but it didn't discuss the deadline.
The question is the relationship between the executive director and Campbell.
yes,
Okay.
yes. They answered the question.
Okay.
And I think you probably answered this while ago. Did you make an effort to solicit private sector involvement?
Yes.
That's you did, you have, just, and how,
Yeah.
what kind of?
I don't know, I know that we have some emails, I don't know if we have any other, I don't know if there's other information. It's kind of an ongoing, it's been an ongoing effort to do that.
I know we've been talking
Yeah.
about it for years.
Yeah.
I've been on the board, so.
Was this advertised publicly that we were, the EDA was seeking sites?
Say it again?
Was it advertised publicly that the EDA was seeking sites for this complex that's being proposed?
Not that we were seeking sites, it's just like with any land negotiation, the minute you go public that you're negotiating, that's why you go into closed session to discuss those
But
acquisitions of property.
originally you didn't, when it was first being proposed, it was never advertised that there were other sites that was the sites that were being proposed.
Does he
And
ever
advertised.
advertise that you're
Okay.
looking,
We're not
we're looking
required.
for something?
You're not required to, plus the thing is, we've seen before, that once there's a property that is conducive for business, industry, or whatever, and you go negotiate with the property owner or the real estate agent or whatever, but once the word gets out that, hey, the government's involved, you've seen it, their price just went up. Oh, they got deep pockets, let's go ahead and do that. And that's not conducive to being as cost efficient as possible. what are you gonna do? Put out there, hey, we're looking at workforce housing sites. Anybody interested?
Make it competitive.
Pardon me?
Make it competitive.
I think they did make it competitive by looking at available sites and doing something.
Right.
So the sixth question was, were the Campbells originally approached with a request to donate their property, or was there an initial discussion about a purchase price?
There was a discussion about a purchase price. They had the property listed. I believe it was on the market at that time for $550. So a purchase price was discussed initially.
550, okay. Okay, that was their purchase price then?
That was their list
It
price.
was list price, so,
And I believe they had it listed with Mike Silent.
I have another question.
okay, Melanie, did we finish that question?
Okay.
I mean, was there an amount other than the 550, so they had it listed?
Well, that's where we started our
You
negotiations.
started,
with them.
okay.
Yes. When was the EDA board informed about the confidential agreement and the March 1st, 2017 deadline? Was there anyone on the EDA board who was aware of the March 1st deadline? And if so, who?
And then question number 8.
That's number
We have 7
eight,
first, I think.
I don't have those questions. I'm
I'm sorry.
questions.
You don't?
All right.
Let me see, I laid it over here for
All right.
He was doing all that from memory? Okay. So can we do, okay. Are you okay with number 7 coming next? You can even ask about it.
Well, this isn't our only questions.
No, but we wanted to go through these. These are ones the board wanted to go through. So the seventh
Okay.
question was,
All right. I didn't have the sheet.
when was the EDA first briefed on the site and Campbell's offer to donate? Do you have a date? when
The
that-
first time would have been before September 2014, in a closed session. September 2014 was when the board took action. But we don't, I mean, this had been discussed for months prior to that.
And it was discussed as an offer to donate.
Well, at first it was discussed as an offer to purchase.
First.
We initially went into this to purchase the property. That was, I don't even know, I mean, I don't remember thinking, I hope somebody gives us property. We've done that as an EDA, but I don't know that I've ever heard of somebody giving the EDA property, so.
Okay, now, go ahead,
Number 8,
yeah, that's
that's the same as mine.
well,
When was the EDA board told about the March 1st deadline of 2017 by the Campbells to start the project? And who on the EDA board was aware of the March 1st deadline, or was anyone aware of it? And as far as the directors?
Can't remember, that been back in September 14.
This is, because it's been almost 3 years, you can go back through your notes and find when you discussed this, but in the September 2014 meeting, all of the board members were made aware of that.
Of the March 1st deadline of
That's
of
correct.
2016?
And 17
Huh?
of 2017.
2017. So it was, okay.
Well, with confidence that we can compare. Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's part of the, and I know because we're at the point we're at now, it seems a little unusual maybe, but at that time, we're thinking, is this going to be a problem? You know, we were originally talking about purchasing some property, it then got to the point where it was gifted to us and going through that process. I can honestly say, and I think, and as people have talked to me about this, I know I was appraised of it, but I also know I wasn't worried that it was going to happen. And I don't know that other board members really, I can't speak for them, they're not here.
Are we talking about the deadline?
The deadline, the deadline.
You are aware?
Yeah, I was aware. I don't know that it was something that was of concern about getting the project done. And-
Because it was so far in the future, we did not think we would be 2.5 years later and still not having our permits and through that process. We never thought that would be the case.
I mean, right or wrong, that's the way it is. I mean,
Yeah, but just the other day, we had a discussion, you and I did, didn't we not, Mr. Dressler?
go ahead.
Okay, and you had said that Jennifer had mentioned to you that something about way back in 2014, and you didn't recall anything, but there was the minutes were checked, and there was nothing in the minutes.
Nothing in the minutes about it,
Nothing
there
in
was
the minutes.
discussion.
And you said that you did not recall anything,
Yeah.
but you had no reason to doubt what Jennifer told you, but you didn't recall anything.
Okay,
That's still accurate today, isn't it?
okay. Yeah, I think it's, yeah.
You didn't recall March 1st, 2017 deadline ever being discussed,
I'm sure it was.
but you don't recall
Yeah,
it.
I'm sure it was.
Madam Chairman, I ask a question. Mr. Whitten, were you aware of this March 1st, 2017 deadline?
He was not. Mr. Whitten was not
My question
our
is-
attorney.
Oh, okay.
I was not an EDA attorney at the time. I attended all the meetings, but I was not aware of it.
When were you aware? Could I ask you when you were aware of this deadline?
But I mean, whenever it came out in the paper.
Oh, when it came out of the paper?
Yeah.
So you were not familiar with it? Okay.
And then you went back to your office and you called Blair Mitchell and asked him if he was aware of it.
I believe I texted Mr. Mitchell that when I read the newspaper article.
Okay. Well, I came in your office, met with you, and you told me you had talked to him on the phone.
Yeah, by text. I texted him.
Okay. And that he wasn't aware of the deadline either. He just found out from you.
He found it from the newspaper article.
Okay. The newspaper article that came out that day.
Yeah, let's see, I was at a conference like the 30th of April. I was at a conference that
Okay.
Saturday.
And that was when Mr. Mitchell first told me about it. That's what he told you.
That's it, it's like hearsay.
I mean, that is just
Objection.
I spoke,
Mr. Mitchell, talk to Mr. Mitchell. I think it's fair for Mr. Whitten to tell
I
what the
did-
conversation was.
I did
Did you
speak.
remember this and that and the whole thing?
I did speak to Mr. Mitchell.
Okay.
And he did tell me he didn't know.
That's what you said.
Could I ask another question, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Was this deadline that we're speaking of now, was that in the written contract or was this a verbal agreement with the Campbells?
We don't have anything with the Campbells.
You don't have a written agreement of this deadline? Is that,
Do you have any evidence in writing of all of this agreement?
I don't think we do.
Does the EDA
We
have?
can, this is not our deadline. This was a deadline for the Campbells to be able to get the tax break.
yes.
So this is a deadline between the Campbells and whatever agency they were qualifying for a tax break. This is not a deadline that was between the Campbells and the EDA.
Have you seen that deadline? Have you seen that
Yes.
written evidence? When did you see it?
I mean, that's been 2015 when they applied for it, but this has been going on for so long. To tell you a specific date, I cannot do that.
But even though it was a long time ago, it was still something that if things didn't happen in sequence the way they were supposed to, it would kill the deal. It would possibly kill the deal with the contribution of the property.
And if I can interject here, all along, we've been working with a private developer to make this project happen. So the deadline to us really meant nothing,
It meant nothing.
because we have been working with a private developer. So if that private developer took over the project, the Campbells no longer qualified for a tax break because it was no longer with a tax exempt entity. So it really had no meaning at that point once a private developer came on board.
So you would have simply sold the property that you now own to that. And then
And the Campbells would have received money for the property
So
rather
then-
than a tax break.
So it was going to be free, as you had said publicly.
If the EDA owned the project, not if a private developer owns the project.
Okay. Going back to the knowledge of the EDA board members, are there any EDA board members that say they're aware of the March 1st, 2017?
I would hope so.
Before the April 20th thing.
I haven't talked to them about it other than the meetings.
Okay, where are we, number 11 now? Let's see. Well, Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Whitten serving in their capacities legal counsel for EDA award aware, that's supposed to be aware of the deadlines, and I think, yes, and Dan is not.
And if we're,
Number 11.
number 11, I think
It's
we
an answer
answered
instead
that.
of award.
I think we had talked about that one.
I think we've talked about that too. And what issues, what were the issues that delayed the deadline?
So
What were you?
we went back and forth with the town on the site plan. Originally, we submitted the 3-building plan to the town. They came back with, and we were meeting with Steve Burke and Jeremy Camp at that time. And Steve came back with, well, you need you need an entrance and an exit on the property. When we went back to our engineers, we could not get 3 buildings and have an entrance and an exit on the property, so we had to go to a 2-building site plan. Well, then Steve said if you can get a letter from the fire marshal stating that you only need 1 entrance, then we can go back to the 3-building site plan. So we went to the fire marshal, he submitted that letter, and then we went back to the 3
So the
plan,
fire marshal
3-building
agreed
plan.
with it?
Yes. There's no other apartment complex in Front Royal that has 2 entrances. So then we had to go back to our engineers, and we went back to the 3-building site plan. So it was a back and forth with the site plan, with the easements, DEQ. I mean, this has become a typical process, and it's not one entity's fault. It's just the process that it has become trying to get something approved. I mean, the Academy is another good example that we're still waiting on comments from DEQ, and that has been in the works for over a year as well.
Did DEQ ever give you anything on this one?
That we are still waiting.
So no DEQ action
And we have an email that says we will hear something by June 22nd.
for this year?
Yes.
That's a good question.
Make sure they put a date on that.
And I would just reiterate what Jennifer's saying about some typicalness of it just takes time to do it. I mean, having sat on the EDA for a number of years now and done projects, it does take time. You know, the Aztec site is unusual, but I just look at the history of time that it takes. I mean, we were in situations where we ask a question and it's a year before we get an answer to a question. So, just because of the legalities of it. And in this particular case, it felt like it should be a little quicker, but it wasn't. You know, it just
It
took
used
time.
to be in play.
Yeah, it took time to do that. I don't think there was ever, at least in my mind, I never felt like there was a doubt that the project wouldn't occur. I felt like it was moving forward. We're still getting good answers. It's just working out all the little quirks. It's everything. It's not as simple as building a house on a lot. You know, there's a lot more people involved, and we had to do, I don't know if they were public hearings where you had to go and meet with all the residents in the area. I mean, that took months to make that happen. So there's lots of things that occurred to help this project occur.
Question, Madam Chair. How much has been invested in this project up to this time?
What do we, 300, I mean, we're committed.
So there's a commitment of 420. 82 of that is a DEQ to be determined, but that's the minimum amount that will be required from DEQ, 82,000.
Those credits,
Yes. And, I mean, Doug's well aware of the credits, the nutrient credits or wetland credits, whatever they're called. We had to do it for Leitrim Parkway. The Leitrim Parkway would pay $296,000 for wetland credits, for .02 wetland credits.
And you would still receive these credits even if you passed the property on to a private developer?
Oh, yes, they're required.
They stay with the property,
Yes.
they stay with the property no matter what.
That's correct.
But you could add that cost into what you're selling the property for, probably.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's a to be determined number, so that could go up to $100,000 once we get these comments back from DEQ.
You said, I thought there was some comment, so much money had been spent, if you walked away, you'd be responsible for, at that point, they say $500,000, I think it's been fine-tuned. Was that money actually expended by the EDA, or was that money that, was there a HUD grant involved too, where when so much money, the EDA didn't put out all that money, but if they walked away, then they probably have to repay it, is that correct?
So the only funds that were not spent were the $82,000. We have not received any of that money, the grant money. Because if this is passed on to a private developer, they do not qualify for the grant money. So we have not accepted any grant money.
So this is like sometimes there's grants where you have to complete the project first and get reimbursed.
And
And
then
others where you get grants up front and then you have to show how it was spent. But this
Yes.
was the former one I just said.
Correct. And this grant of $300,000, the EDA would have to own the project for 15 years.
Is any of this money would be returned to you when you pass it on to the developer as a cash refund?
Yes.
How much?
Any expense except for the traffic study that we were required, and we did 2 traffic studies.
And is that, the traffic study, was that on possible light at the intersection? Is that,
That's correct.
so there would be a possibility of a light having to be installed in that area?
They did not find that that was warranted.
Okay.
Going through the expenses, since we're on that, Archie had showed me that apparently there's $800,000 expected to get the property ready.
That's the site, that was the estimate from Pinoni for the site cost.
Right, is that removing the dirt and things of that nature? Because it looks kind of a hilly piece of property.
It is.
And if this project didn't get passed on to a developer, then is this something the EDA would go forward with and develop it themselves?
I think that's the plan.
That's the
That
plan.
would be the plan, if they don't have a private developer.
And going through the stuff, when you went to the closing, apparently Patty Wines and Dan Whitten were at the closing. And why was not a deed of gift given instead of a deed that said $445,000 on it? When apparently when Dan asked, where's the check, Patty Wines said it's free. So why wasn't a deed of gift used? I'm just curious.
That's a legal question. I mean,
Legal question. Are we going to move on from that, or is that going to be
Is
answered?
there no answer to that?
There's no answer? All right, then I'll, if it's okay, Madam Chair, I'll pose another question then, if you don't mind. Tax, how much tax revenue would this property generate if it's owned by the EDA? And you have rental properties?
well, we would pay, as we do with some of our other properties, taxes as if it was a regular.
So the county would receive tax money from this property even though it's owned by the EDA?
Payment in lieu of
Is
taxes?
that?
Just like you did with the Strasburg Road property, the Dulles Industries building,
Before it's sold.
which we sold that property. But during that time, taxes were paid to the county, even though the EDA owned it.
So there would be taxes paid. So if this generated a lot of school children, then the tax money that we would be, Greg, you're smart.
We need the business.
You see where I'm going with it. And then, I guess probably a concern would be, hey, we have a lot more children here, but the taxes, if it wasn't being taxed, then, it would be an unfair situation in my mind. Is that
And this is
reasonable
not
statement?
a tax exempt,
It's not a tax
it
exempt.
cannot be tax exempt The residential part of it cannot be tax exempt. In fact, the financing that we received, any other financing that we get for industrial prospects is tax exempt financing. This project would not have been tax exempt financing because it
So
was
you
not
wouldn't have to
qualified.
pay real estate taxes, is that
The
correct?
EDA will?
I hope you consider that a fair question. Okay, Madam Chair, are you finished?
I don't know, did we get the-
I think that's 13, did you?
No, we didn't, no. Given how things have transpired with this project, what would you do differently in handling this project?
We're not done yet.
Not done yet, so we're not done yet.
I mean, quite honestly, you do kind of, that's a fair question. I mean, that's a fair question. I think anything you work on, you always, you assess once you're done. I mean, quite honestly, we go back, how did it finally end up? It's not done yet. So it's hard, it's a little hard to say I would do things real differently. I don't know that I have a real good answer at this point. I think at the end of the day, maybe I would, when it's all said and done. I think I would be able to come back and say,
Are you going to project a date for that?
yeah. Say that again?
Are you going to project a date for that?
June 22nd.
Oh, that's DEQ. Yeah, DEQ.
When you do a project, do you run a project off of a flow chart so you can follow the progress, track the dates, and know where you're at any given time?
We have project management software. Any project that we have, including Leitrim Parkway, West Main Street Extended, all of those projects, we use project management.
So it's possible to put in the program and flag an expiration date. And that would have flagged 30 days, 90 days before for action. That could have been done.
That's correct. With the Leitrim Parkway, we started the project management software with all of our projects.
Okay.
But no one of the
That's a good
deadline, like the question 13, no one of the, anybody done things differently, no one of the deadline, I know you touched on some of the reasons for the delays, and it wasn't exactly any one entity, but again, knowing that deadline, in hindsight, would have been something that you could have maybe relayed to people or been pushing for it a little bit harder. I know sometimes the harder you push, the more pushback you get to it, but is that anything that could have been followed up? And there again, it's hindsight, but anything that could have been pushed a little bit more. I know that, like you said, I just know what was in the paper, I guess, and what you talked about. I think the town had to do, they requested 2 traffic studies, and then they said you could do one thing, and then they said, no, you can do this one. And what sometimes we don't understand or realize, every time we ask for additional information or something, it creates additional cost and additional time. It's not just like you can draw a line on a piece of paper, you can get us an answer back in 3 days. So sometimes we, not just us, or the town, or any government entity, or whatever, they just don't realize unless they're in there. Because anytime you ask for something, again, the cost is going to be for the engineer to go back and draw the plans, and that takes time, and that takes money. So is that anything you think that, in looking back, that you might have been able to expedite in any fashion?
I think at the end, honestly, and I know I'm sounding evasive, I know I'm sounding evasive, but I think at the end of the day, when we get this project done, I think we're going to be able to look back and see better, would that have been something that we should have done?
Would it affect DEQ getting it done by?
It wouldn't affect DEQ.
And
Yeah, it would.
DEQ's been on it since
Yeah.
when?
2015.
15, 6 years, okay.
Would you be willing to post an after-action report of your findings and what you would do different?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You always learn something. That's one of the things in any role I've ever had, you always learn something. I think for me, it's what are your motives? Why are you doing what you're doing? What is your intention? I think in our case, we have a very clear intention. We're trying to get a workforce housing project complete. And at the end of the day, are there things that we would do differently and perhaps better? And I have no problem doing that in anything I do.
Question on that, and it's a workforce housing you want to get done, but what is the real intent now? That things have kind of changed along the way. And is the what is the exact intent of having workforce housing? Because what we talked about initially was it can, you know, it's not serving as much the sheriff's department and the police department as we originally had thought.
This would be my view.
Okay.
This would be my view. I think Front Royal Warren County is a great place to live. Came here in 1983. I had a couple of choices to live. There happened to be a brand new apartment building right across from the Howard Johnsons. Scotty Reed, first person I met in Front Royal, pointed me to, I can't remember the guy's name that owned it, and that's how we were the first tenants there. There weren't other places for us to go. That's 1983, and we were two new teachers. We're having that same problem now, and I, of course, I'm going to be partial to teachers and other folks like that. I am. I'll admit it up front. But I think we have a community concern or issue there that housing is available for anybody in those brackets. That there needs to be places. I wish it could be just for teachers or firefighters or policemen or nurses. And that was used as a descriptor. And I hear what you're saying, Archie. That sounded like that was just who it was for. And all along, my intention in saying that was the description. That's the type of person or type of income earner that we were after. It'd be great if we could say that it was just for them. I totally get it. We can't say it's just for them.
Right.
But I still think our community needs that level of housing. We still need that level of housing. It'd be nice. This will be a start. I mean, it's going to be, what, 24 units now? 26 units.
And really, you don't think that private enterprise could fulfill the...
It would be great. It would be great. I think that's what we found out with this. Since 2002, the EDA hasn't done it, and it's been on our plans since then. Nobody's stepped up to do it, and it kind of got to a point where we said, if we can do it, is it going to happen? We're going to give it a try. We'll see how it works. I think at the end of the day, I think we're going to find out that it will.
We also, another example of the EDA stepping in and doing something like this, back in the 90s when we did not have any private developers building spec buildings for industrial use, the EDA stepped up and built the first spec building in the Happy Creek Park. It was leased from day one, and then it eventually sold to a private user. So that's kind of been the EDA role for a while, is get something started, and as soon as you announce you're doing something, you have private developers that will come out of the woodwork and say, oh, we want to get involved. And I think this project will probably be no different.
So what's the legal obligation now to purchase the property, or have you already purchased it?
So we have no legal obligation, but I'll let you speak to the moral obligation.
I mean, if it comes to, yeah, I think one of the things also, and here again, this is, I'll go back to the learning curve of being on the EDA, how critical it is that the EDA present itself as a fair, a group that has integrity, and a group that is doing what is best for the community. That's a big deal. When industry or businesses come and want to move here, they need to feel like they're going to be treated fairly. They're going to need to be treated like their needs are met. And I'm kind of going around the answer here, but it is a big deal for local people or people coming from the outside that want to come here feel like they're treated fairly. And in the case of purchasing a property, we walked into this way back 2014 or before that with the idea of purchasing a property. That was the intention. And I think when it came to this particular thing with the Campbells, there was an understanding that the reason it was gifted was the tax credit. They didn't get the tax credit, there was no reason for them to gift it.
Yeah, when did you all, whose idea was it to do the gifting of the property and the tax credit?
I think it was just in the conversation. I'm sure it was in the initial I don't know when that occurred. I know when we heard about it in 2014, but I don't know
I mean, we've done that before. I mean,
Yeah.
we did with the renovation of the old high school. I think it was like, there was different types of tax credits, I think. Historic tax credits, and we wound up winning big on that, I believe.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's other
Very
types of tax credits. And
I think the thing is that what Jennifer said is in terms of is there a legal obligation to, I mean, it's deeded to the EDA. We've got the property, it's deeded to us.
But you
How
have to
far,
sell it to
how far,
someone?
yeah. Well, and if we did that, we got free property and we sold it. Is that fair? I mean, it comes down to that. Is that fair? Would you want to deal with me if I did that? To me, that's not fair. That's not what I want to present as a Front Royal Warren County EDA. I want to be fair. And even though there may not be a legal reason to do it, I think there's certainly a reason to do it. I don't know.
Going to the legal issue of it, at the April 28th meeting that apparently was brought up, the March 1st deadline, Mr. Whitten wasn't there, your EDA attorney.
Yeah.
And then you all made that decision, apparently, on that day. Is there a reason why you all did that without the advice of your counsel?
I think because we thought it was the right thing to do. Here again, let me, at the end of the day, when this project is completed and done, I think we're going to assess all the actions that we took. And Mr. Murray had a great question and hold us to it. We'll present things that we would have done differently. So, you know, sometimes it's good. Maybe we could have waited a month and maybe gotten some more advice on it. But I think we thought it was the right thing to do. There wasn't any contention on the board to this isn't the right thing to do. So that was the reason. Yes, sir.
Do you have a profit and loss projection if you did this project yourself? And if so, have you determined the profit and loss?
We don't make a ton of money.
So we had to submit that to the bank before we could qualify for financing. And it averaged, I believe it was year 4 that we would make a small profit. Every year 1 through 3 was a break-even margin. Year 4 and 5 there was a small profit. And year 6 is when you would see a significant profit, but it still wasn't hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it was a profit. But year 1 through 3 was a break even.
Would this require additional staff to manage and maintain this project if you did it yourself?
I'm not getting that.
No, you're not going
It costs too much money.
No, this would have been on the EDA step, which is, we go back to the beginning of this meeting when we said this was not something the EDA staff wanted to necessarily do. We have a staff of 3 to oversee 36 apartments, along with all the other projects that we have going on, was not something we were looking forward to, but we would have made that happen to get this project done.
So you would contract that portion of it or other portions? If you owned it, you would contract the maintenance?
Oh, the maintenance, yes.
And the oversight of management?
The plan is management you guys would do.
Yes, management would have been with the EDA, but we would have contracted out the maintenance.
But you would manage it, EDA would manage the renters coming and going?
Sell it.
Right, exactly.
When you figured in your profit and loss, when you step behind the first few years, did you figure in the maintenance cost and deduct that from what the profit would be?
Yes. It's actually a requirement from the banks. They give you a spreadsheet of everything we need to.
Thank you.
It goes back to one item, which, as I understand it, you were talking about $820,000 land prep cost, $445,000 land purchase perhaps, and projection of $420,000 already spent. So you'll have $1.6 million into it before you get started on this project. $3.5 million. Is that correct? Numbers there?
So that $823,000 is an estimate. That was an estimated cost
$823,000.
for the site cost.
Yes.
If the EDA was doing this project, there would not have been a purchase price of $445,000 to purchase the property. if it was gifted to us.
Yes.
So that $3.2 million that we had approved our resolution for was strictly construction cost. That's all that number included.
But how much have you spent up to date now? Up to this time, how much have you actually spent on the project?
So that would be the 420 minus the 82.
Okay. So you spent over $300,000. So
What did all that include? Because has there been any dirt moved out of the
Well, we don't
site?
have our permits yet. We gotta wait on DEQ to,
So it was just spent on planning and
Traffic study.
There's a list in here.
engineering perhaps, and traffic study, permits, DEQ study, and then there's
you have to get a bond
escrow account.
to prove that you have the funds available to do the project. Just like with VDOT projects, you have to prove to them that you have the money to move forward with the project before they'll give you the revenue sharing funds.
when the EDA was going through all this, had the Campbells relayed to anyone about this March 1st deadline that needed to be met from their point of view?
At the beginning of the project, yes.
They told you?
Yes.
Okay.
Another question for you. How about HUD? How much has HUD contributed, or how much is HUD going to contribute to this project?
It's a total of $316,000 for the grant, but we have not accepted a dollar of that money yet.
Why?
Because if a private developer takes this project over, that grant money is no longer acceptable.
So not knowing the figures, you don't know how much the monthly mortgage would be of this proposed project. When it's all said and done, you rent them, would there be a mortgage payment by the EDA? Or would you do all this on cash money?
Oh, no, we would get a construction loan, just like we would with any project, and then the rental income would pay that debt service, just like with our other projects that we do.
You don't have any idea of the numbers on that?
That's part of our profit loss.
Yeah, okay.
Statement.
That's in your profit loss?
Yes.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
I have a few questions. The contract of purchase dated the first day of April 2016 doesn't mention at all that this is free. Is there a reason why it doesn't? I don't think Mr. Whitman wrote this up. Why did he did?
I'm sure there is a reason. I'll give you that reason.
You don't know? And then also in here, like a whereas clause, there's no mention of a March 1st, 2017 deadline. Is there any reason why that wouldn't have been put in there?
Because that's not a deadline between the EDA and the Campbells. That was a deadline between the Campbells and whomever they were getting the tax break from, as I mentioned earlier.
So if it wasn't an agreement with the EDA, then you own a piece of property that's completely free.
And it goes back to our moral obligation.
Okay.
I didn't understand your question. I couldn't.
So I understand the EDA owns a piece of property that they did not pay for, and perhaps obligated or not obligated to pay for it at this point. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
That's right.
Okay.
The HUD statement, that's apparently Claire Mitchell did the HUD statement, but he had retired, and Mr. Whitman was there. It has the cash to sell of $429,305 when there was no cash expected to be given to the seller. Is there an explanation for that?
Not really.
I'm not listening. I am not saying anybody did anything wrong. I'm just asking a question. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah. No.
No? Okay. All right. My understanding is none of the board members, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Rich, but none of the board members had knowledge of March 1st, 2017 deadline at that April 28th meeting when it was brought up. That was my understanding. Is that not accurate?
Here again, it's one of those things that we were appraised of it. it was probably not remembered maybe by some.
Does anybody remember it? Any
I don't know,
of
you
you?
have to ask them. You have to ask them.
No one at that April meeting said they did not remember it.
Yeah.
So.
And then there's no written evidence of this deadline with the EDA here, and there's nothing in the minutes. There's nothing that you all can produce.
I think we've already mentioned that that was not a deadline between the EDA and the
Right, but
Campbells.
there's nothing in writing that can be produced.
Are we
That's
done?
all the questions I have.
Are we done?
We ask you, Madam Chair, are we done?
I think we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're done with that. What else?
Madam Chair, the only other item, we have two other, I don't think we have anything new for liaison unless somebody has something. The new construction amount's going to have to go on the agenda for consideration. Under the county code, the Board of Supervisors may set a rate of charge for the extraordinary use of the streets and roads of sanitary districts to the owners of lots upon which new construction is commencing. The rate of charge must be paid by the home builder property at the time of the building permit application for a dwelling. And really it's because you get the concrete trucks and the gravel trucks and the well drillers that come in, they're bigger equipment. So if the roads, particularly the roads are soft, and soft would be like in the spring right after the initial thaw or during the rainy season, you can do considerable amount of damage versus the normal car traffic. So the list down below there is a list of the existing sanitary districts where we have recharge road usage. Blue Mountain's 1,500, High Knob 2,300, Linden Heights 1,500, Chandler Farms 2,500, Chandler Shores 1,000, Sky Landing Estates 2,000. One of the things I do need to correct it, the first paragraph on the second page, where I said under Virginia law, Warren County cannot charge a construction impact fee. Dan pointed out to me, the law has changed, but it's tricky. It's based on population growth, but you have to do this exhaustive transportation model to determine. We're much simpler than the exhaustive transportation model. But it used to be you can't charge an impact fee. Those were used to be against the law. So now there's some allowance for it. There are a couple of localities in Virginia that do it, but you have to have a full-blown TIA transportation model in the entire county, which we don't have. You have to spend quite a bit of money to develop. But at this time, we have two new sanitary districts that have come on board, being Shangri-La and Lakefront Royal. And we have asked each of them, would you like to have a road construction fee? And like Lakefront Royal's case, they were collecting on the HOA side before anyway. In addition, while we're going through the process, we asked, and the board just added those two to the code section to allow us to make that charge. I went ahead and sent an email or a letter to all the other sanitary districts saying, look, we're going through the process. Would you like to increase yours? All right, so what we received information back, Blue Mountain would like to go from 1,500 to 2,500. Lakefront Royal wants to establish one at 1,500. And Shangri-La would like to establish one at 1,500. And Chandler Farms wanted to go to 4,000. Now, one of the things under the old guidelines was we have to be careful because we can't charge an impact fee unless we get to now through this model thing. It has to really reflect the actual damage to the road. Meaning, specifically, we're not charging this impact fee to take that money and go build a paved road 5 miles across the subdivision. The idea is you need to help fix up the roads that are going to that particular lot. Now, the reality is the cost of gravel has gone up significantly, the cost of fuel's gone up, all those types of things. And looking at Shenandoah Farms, in 2003, they went from 1 to 2,500. They had requested at that time to go to 5,000. The board backed it down and said, that's a little bit too big of a jump, guys, because every new house would be a $5,000 charge. So using CPI calculator, the fee, the $2,500 fee from 2003 would be $3,364 today. So I recommend, instead of going to 4,000, I recommend to go to 3,500. Archie, you probably know the cost of a load of gravel is probably over $400 in some parts of the farms today. So it doesn't take much to get that cost. It doesn't take much to get the cost of us putting a motor grader on there to regrade the road, which we have to do sometimes. But That's the only one where I haven't recommended going up to the full amount.
So what do we call that now?
Doug, excuse me.
It's just a new construction road use fee.
Okay.
So it's been increased.
Another thing perhaps should be taken into account is that some of these subdivisions that may not be but a half of a mile long, and yet they're charged with an exorbitant fee for the amount of road. Perhaps that we should look at some point, the longer the roads, perhaps the more the fee, but it should be some sort of a fair estimate made somewhere along the line that's fair to everybody.
And I agree with you, and here's, it's like Bob said, how can we charge, $4,000 per lot everywhere? Well, like Shangri-La, I mean, some may be farther away from the quarry.
Yeah.
Shangri-La is also one little short road. That's why I think they
And
want
that's what I thought on.
Now, even in Shenandoah Farms, I might have a house that's 2 houses in from a state road. Why is that fair than the one that's Venus, Venus Branch that's 4 miles from the entrance? So you get into the, you almost, it'd be hard, you almost have to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
But it's just during the construction, it's
Just
a
during-
one-time fee.
one-time fee, And it comes from either in the case of Shangri-La, it came from their advisory board, but I think it matches what the HOA charged, in Electric Oil. And Shangri-La, it came from their board on request.
Even though it's a very short road compared to Lake Front Road.
It is, like Shangri-La, that might get you 2 loads of stone and a grader to put it down. That's basically what you would get if you had construction. Now, Shangri-La's probably got 5 vacant lots. They'd be lucky to build one house in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. You don't see, now, Shangri-La Farms, you might have 20 new houses next year. So it just, some of us do not have vacant lots and stuff. But, I don't, with that adjustment, I don't think the rest of them are pretty much in line. I think it's pretty reasonable. But I'd have to put it on the next agenda, but I just wanted to put on a work session, make sure everybody's agreeable with what's going on.
They were the recommendations from the HOA.
That's correct.
Okay. So that's on the next agenda. Are we done with the work session items then?
Yes.
Come back.
We ready to come back?